Guess what? The music's gone quiet. That means we should probably start. How are we going with NDC so far? Everyone good? Yeah, did you fall asleep in the last session because it's that mid-afternoon time? And own up, come on, we've all done it, yeah. Who's planning on falling asleep in this session? I'm taking notes, I know where you are. If you do feel sleepy, make sure you do snore so that we know who you are and someone next to you can just slap you around or something like that. All right, so this particular talk, as you can see, reignite your desire to improve. Hopefully you are in the right room, which is good, you can read, which is great. I should do the introduction, so hello, I'm Richard. That's probably all you need to know, right? If you're going to tweet, feel free to include me on the hashtag, especially if it's abuse. I like that. Flame is always fun, right? We learn from our mistakes, so I'm going to try and make as many mistakes as possible. You can also find me on the blog, all that sort of thing. So let's get on to it. So bit of a story. The projector's okay. Had a coffee with a friend a little while ago. He rang me up, said, look, Richard, can we have a chat? Want to come and talk a few ideas around with you? I said, yeah, sure, no problem. So we arranged the coffee, sat down, as you do, a bit of small talk, and eventually said, so what's up? He said, so this agile thing, the agile thing, which is always a good sign, we moved to agile, you do a bit of Scrum training and coaching. So we did that. We moved to Agile, and we were working at it for a while. And the team made some good improvements. And then things have just kind of gone, And it's not an uncommon story, right? Anyone in that at the moment, by the way? Okay, I'm glad you're in this room then. Anyone never experienced that? Okay, good. Well, or bad, depending on how the perspective is. Anyway, so he's like, this team's just kind of, we went great for a while and we've kind of plateaued and nothing's really happened. This is not uncommon. It's a really normal situation. Could have also said things like, the team doesn't think there's any improvements to be made anymore. We've made all the improvements we can and we can't make any more improvements. Has anyone been in a retro and they've actually said that? There's nothing to improve. Okay, you're all liars. It's an interesting challenge, and this is really what led to this particular talk, this idea that teams get to a point they stop improving. How do we get them going again? How can we get to that next level? And really, when we think about it, teams in this state are behaving in this way. They're not doing continuous improvement anymore. They're doing continuous no improvement. At one point, this particular building on this particular bridge would have been nice and shiny and new, and it would have been all exciting, and what a view they would have had up there. And then over time, things have just kind of faded, degraded. The rust has started forming. Things aren't going great anymore. This is a common team behavior. And the question we need to ask ourselves a little bit is why? Why do teams behave this way? What is it that leads us to this? Looking around, there's kind of this idea that we have this mental model of how things should be done. We have this idea that this is the way things work. We've read some stuff and we want to do this. And generally what we find, or what I find, is that teams that start doing Agile and actually start working as teams get to a point where they've aligned their mental model of how they should work with how they should work. And once those two things are in alignment, the teams therefore don't need to improve anymore because they now know how things should be done. And they are doing them that way, which is great. But there's a problem with that. Problem is that when they start seeing things that are contrary to how their mental model works, they tend to ignore them. Any data or facts that say this thing isn't working quite as we expected, they ignore it because their mental model is now set. They've decided that they know how things should be done, this is how it works, we're good. No change needed, nothing to do. But then they lean on that and we end up with historical bias. And we say, because it worked for us in the past and because we improved in the past, therefore, for no facts, reasons, or thinking whatsoever, it will work for us in the future, which is the Kodak problem, right? Or the Blockbuster problem, or any of these other companies that thought it would work for them in the past, it will work for them in the future, and don't worry about changing or improving. We then blindly trust that our mental model is correct, and it doesn't work for us. It's an unfortunate behavior. And if you leave it too long over time, then what happens? Eventually, your team will start having morale issues. Your team will start having quality issues because they start getting lazy. They're comfortable now. They ignore the problems that are occurring. They let those problems build up. They don't see them because it doesn't fit their mental model of how things should be done. So then management sees there's a problem and they want to do something about it. So they'll then go and enhance the team by adding some contractors with the intent that these external people might be able to give the team a bit of a boost. Anyone seen this? Yeah? Anyone experiencing it at the moment? Anyone that contractor? Okay, just checking. Eventually they might try doing things like disbanding and reforming teams. You know, if these people aren't working well together, let's just mix them up if they've got that capacity. And eventually left too long, what happens? You know what happens. Outsourcing occurs. It's very sad. And now we don't have jobs anymore and we suck. I don't like it when that happens. I actually don't like it when the first one happens. I don't like morale issues in teams. We want work to be enjoyable. We want to enjoy our careers. We have fun doing what we're doing. Why do we want to move away from that and go to a job where we kind of just turn up each day and you know, just do the same old, and there's nothing interesting, nothing new, especially in this industry. Now, I'm talking to the choir a little bit here because you guys are at a conference and learning. So hopefully you take this away and help other people. But we've got this behavior problem, right? The continuous no improvement. So how do we fix that? Well, the best business strategy is always this one, right? Hope. Just hope that things will magically improve. Yes, we love it. But hope's not going to help improve any behavior changes. It's not going to change anything around what we do. It just means that we're putting our head in the sand and ignoring the problem. Looking around at behavior problems and ways to change behavior, I came across this thing called the COM-B model. Don't worry if you've not heard of it. I hadn't heard it before. But it's this idea that any kind of behavior is the result of complex systems and how things interact within that system. So there's a paper there by people's names who I can't say. Or you can just go to behaviorchangewheel.com. But basically, there's these three aspects. The inner part being this idea that behavior comes from, and the slides will be up later, so don't worry about taking too many photos unless I'm in it, in which case, hey. Capability, either psychological or physical. Opportunity to actually express a behavior. Again, social and physical opportunities. And then motivation, either the automatic intrinsic motivations we have within ourselves or those with our brains turned on where we're reflecting and say we want to achieve something, so therefore we will behave this way. Very basic structure of how things work. And then the red circle around that are the interventions that you can use to change the system. So interventions need to change the system that drives the behavior. And then the gray circle around the outside are the policies to enforce or support that change in the long term. Make sense? So this is behavioral psychologists who've come up with this model. It's kind of cool. The behaviorchangewheel.com site explains it in a little bit more detail, and the paper in particular goes much deeper. But if we dig into some of these, I'm not going to go into all of them, but let's dig into one, capacity. So this one here, you can see this is obviously physical capacity. Now, how does that relate to us doing development work? Well, our physical capacity really relates to how much workload we have in front of us and how tired we are. Everyone's been in that situation of the death march, right? Maybe not, hopefully not actually. Where you've got a deadline coming up and you are just under the pump to try and get this thing done. And you end up tired and you end up worn out. How much improvement capacity do you have at that point? How much ability do you have to change any behavior? Pretty much zero, right? Or maybe less than zero because you're just so tired you can't do anything. And as a result, you start making mistakes and those quality issues we talk about come back into play. This is a problem. If nothing else, I would suggest any behavior change, start by saying no to some things. You don't get to change anything if you are so tired that you can't even lift your arms up to do anything. You've got to have some rest. You've got to have some downtime. If you find yourself working really, really, really long hours and you're turning up at work every day more tired than you went home, that's a problem. You need to change something. Now, I can't give you any tips for that really, other than to say no to something and to stop doing something, whatever that might be. But more than anything else, find the space. If you're not sure how to, talk to those people around you who are trusted advisors for you, who you can get their ear and get some good advice from, and say, here's what I'm going through, help me. What do I say no to? Because maybe I'm someone who intrinsically likes pleasing people. And I want to say yes all the time. And I can't help but say yes, and then I take on something else, and I take on something else, and I take on something else, and now I've overcommitted myself up to here, and I've basically tied myself into a corner. We also have other forms of capacity, by the way. Trained elephants. That elephant has the physical capacity to break that chain and get out of its bounds, but it doesn't, because when it was young, it was tied to a post with a strong rope, and it pulled on that post for days on end until it gave up and it learned that it couldn't break its bounds. This is this idea of learned helplessness. This is a real problem, not just in animals, it's a real problem in us as people. In 1975, there was an experiment, psychological experiment, ostensibly about noise pollution. And in this study, they took 3 groups of participants, and they put them in a room with a button in front of them. And they said, we're going to play a loud noise to you. It's going to be an annoying noise. And we want to see how long you can go handling noise pollution before you hit the button and stop it. Now, what they didn't tell the participants is that the button was rigged. So they'd get into this room, and this button in front of them, they'd play the noise, and in the first group, they'd hit the button and nothing would happen. Hit it again, nothing would happen. Hit it again, damn it, nothing would happen. Hit it 4th time, noise stops. So they learned that if they could keep hitting the button, the noise would stop. Second group, the control group, got put into the room. Nothing at all happened. Oh, I'm sorry, we've got a problem with our experiment. We'll try again in a minute. Third group got put into the room, and no matter how many times they smashed that button, they kicked the wall, whatever else, the noise wouldn't stop. Oh, sorry, we've obviously had a problem with our button. We'll fix that in the future. What they did in the second round, they then pulled them out, they ran through a second round. In the second round, they put them in a room again, and instead of a button, they had a lever. Participants in the first group manipulated the lever until the noise stops. Participants in the second group that had no noise also figured out how to do it. Participants in the third group, most of them didn't even try because they learned helplessness that quickly. Interesting psychological experiment, challenging for us because this is our work environment. If you're in a work environment where you've learned that you can't influence things, where you've learned that you can't change things because every time you do, management jumps on you and kicks you in the head, then even though management might change and even though culture might change, you've learned from the past that you can't change things, guess what? You don't even try. Even though it's within your ability, even though like the elephant, you now have the ability to make the change, you still don't. We don't like this problem. I don't particularly like this problem because what psychologists have also found is that this is tightly tied to depression. That's a bit of a scary thought. And that's a real problem. We want to avoid that one as well. There's also psychological capacity in terms of this idea of fixed and growth mindsets. Ironically, Carol Dweck also did these sort of things in the mid-70s as well. This idea that some people have this fixed mindset, which is I'm born with a certain capacity, and anything that challenges that capacity, I will try and avoid. Or as soon as I run into a problem, I'm going to just give up because it's outside of my ability. Versus the growth mindset, which, you know, if you've not heard this before, it's pretty simple. I face a challenge, I can learn from that. I can make a mistake and it can be a teaching opportunity, something I can gain from, so I can grow over time. Working with teams, you really need to understand, you know, are my people fixed mindset or are they fixed growth? See, I just made a mistake for you. And understand that these things are not fixed in stone, ironically. People can show a fixed mindset in certain scenarios, and a growth mindset in others, which is an interesting dichotomy in terms of how we think as people. And in the work environment, if we've learned helplessness, we're more likely to show that fixed mindset rather than a growth one. So again, we want to change this stuff. Opportunity. I mentioned management before trying to stop you doing things, or giving you the opportunity only to show slave-like behaviors. Obviously, opportunity, there's classic things like Dilbert that kick in. Everyone loves a good Dilbert comic, right? I'll give you a moment to read that one. I've never seen management have lip service to an idea before. Wow, some slow readers. Do we all get there? We love Dilbert because it's true, right? Motivation, again, another one of these behavior causes, intrinsic and extrinsic. I mentioned before, people who like to please other people will say yes. People who like status will behave a certain way because they want to elevate themselves. Hello, Trump. There'll be other people who avoid conflict. So they will do whatever they can to avoid conflict in terms of behavior. And as someone who avoids conflict is going to be someone who struggles to improve things because you do have to challenge at times. Then there's the reflective kind of motivation I mentioned before, which is I've got an agenda. I want to achieve X, Y, or Z, and therefore I'm going to do stuff. So it might be I want to get a promotion. So what am I going to do? I'm going to suck up to the boss. No one's ever seen a brown nose before, right? Or I want to prove myself right because I happen to have a fixed mindset, and I'm going to set that person up to fail so that I can look awesome. I'm sure you've never encountered that either, especially in large corporates. But again, all these things are part of the behavior model. Behavior comes out of these things. So then how do we change it? Intervention. That's our repair center. And there's all types of interventions. I'm not going to cover them all. I just want to cover a few of them. But what I do want to say is that these interventions are all about initiating change, not embedding change. If you try and leave an intervention in place for the long term, it will become a problem. You use it to nudge the system in the right direction, and then use policies to embed the change. Okay, so enablement. We talked about capacity before. You need to have slack time. Has anyone heard of Tom DeMarco wrote Peopleware, which is one of those seminal books you should read? He also wrote a book called Slack and the Myth of 100% Busy Work, I think it is, whatever the last title is. If you're completely busy, you can't improve. You need to build it in. Again, make sure that happens. Or education and training. Education and training will help you learn things, help you, education obviously being giving you knowledge and training giving you experience in it. There is a big difference because when I send my kids to school, I know which one I want. Wow, tough audience. All right, so you might do things like lunch and learns, where you just basically share information amongst each other. Here's what I was learning, or you do, I saw this on the internet, it's cool, and I'd write an email to the rest of the team, hey, look at this is exciting, this is new, this is something I paid attention to. Or I might sit down and do pairing with someone, which is a form of training, so I'm actually teaching them through experience, or I'm learning off them via experience. Or I might do code and design reviews when I'm looking at pull requests, because of course we're all using Git now, correct? Says not the whole room, interesting. We don't use source control, that's what file shares are for. Okay. But code and design reviews are, again, another one of those places where you can do both education and training. Use these tools in your team to actually improve. There's also incentivization coercion, the carrot and the stick. Again, make sure that these aren't long-term things. If you do something like a bonus, if you say, you know, I want to have a behavior change, I'm going to use a bonus as a mechanism to pay people, you know, to encourage a certain behavior, and the person who does this behavior the most gets a bit of cash. Woo! That's great. Don't use that more than once, because then people come to expect it. And when you eventually decide the bonus is no longer a bonus but a mandatory, taking it away really makes people sad. And then they'll be angry and upset and they'll hate your guts, and that doesn't really work very well. In fact, Dan Pink, anyone heard of this guy? Cool. If you've not, just look up Drive by RSA Animate online. It's a 10-minute video on YouTube, runs through the basics of his book. But he says this, which is pretty straightforward. The problem with making extrinsic or external rewards the only destination that matters is that some people will choose the quickest route to get there, even if it means cutting corners, cheating the system, and taking the low road. So, good example, CEOs who are tasked with maintaining a share price above a certain level for a period of time to get a big fat cash bonus will quite happily gut their companies for short-term profitability to make things look great. They'll get their big fat cash bonus and then they'll leave, and the company will suffer for years afterwards as a result. Yep. Or companies like Enron might use 2 sets of books. The ones they go to the auditors that look great, while behind the scenes they're cheating and doing all sorts of nasty things. These are all bad outcomes. In software development, I want the team to maintain a certain velocity. How many points should we manage this time? Oh, we need to get 100 points per sprint. So what does everyone do? Inflate their estimates, right? Or they just don't finish anything and they just call it done anyway. Or they get to the end of the sprint, the work's not finished, but hey, we could count some of those points, but not all of them. Yes, I see the nods. This is not a confession session though, so you don't have to tell me if that's you. What Dan goes on to say is this. Contrast that with that approach with behavior sparked by intrinsic or internal motivation. When the reward's the activity, which is things like deepening learning, delighting your customers, doing your best, then you don't have to even worry about people cutting corners on quality because they're motivated by themselves to do the best they can. That's what we want. We want that in our teams. So at this point, you might be going, well, why all this intervention talk again? Hopefully, you've got it already. If we've got a team that's continuously not improving, they have a behavior problem. The interventions are designed to change their behavior. Otherwise, things will gradually decline and degrade and get worse and worse and worse over time until the point where we're no longer relevant and we're all out on the job market looking for new jobs. I don't like that. There is one intervention that I haven't covered yet, which is a key one for you guys, hopefully, which is modeling. Because people follow the actions of others, not the words. So you're not going to follow what I'm saying just because I'm up here saying it. You follow things because people model certain behaviors. So if I look at this picture, who do you think the guy in yellow models his game after? Do you reckon he's ever met him, had a conversation with him? Probably not. And yet Ronaldo influences kids all over the world through nothing more than his actions. He leads behavior. He's the classic role model. Not necessarily a good one, by the way. If you want a role model on ego, he's also a great person to look at. But he does model or influence people all around the world in terms of the way he plays and types of things he manages to do on a field, which is awesome. We model all the time our behavior. Leadership is all about modeling a behavior for others and influencing one or more other people. In fact, there is a classic video that does this. Anyone seen this one? Cool. This is about the dancing guy. I'm going to play this for just a couple of minutes because it's fun. It's a grainy video at the start. Sorry about the video quality if you've not seen it before. And hopefully the audio is awesome.
If you've learned a lot about leadership and making a movement, then let's watch a movement happen start to finish in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons. First, of course, a leader needs the guts to stand alone and look ridiculous. But what he's doing is so simple, it's almost instructional. This is key. You must be easy to follow. Now here comes the first follower with a crucial role. He publicly shows everyone else how to follow. Notice how the leader embraces him as an equal. So it's not about the leader anymore. It's about them, plural. Notice how he's calling to his friends to join in. See, it takes guts to be a first follower. You stand out and you brave ridicule yourself. Being a first follower is an underappreciated form of leadership. The first follower transforms a lone nut into a leader. If the leader is the flint, the first follower is the spark that really makes the fire. Now here's the second follower. This is a turning point. It's proof the first has done well. Now it's not a lone nut and it's not two nuts. 3 is a crowd and a crowd is news. A movement must be public. Make sure outsiders see more than just the leader. Everyone needs to see the followers because new followers emulate followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, then 3 more immediately. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point, and now we have a movement. As more people jump in, it's no longer risky. If they were on the fence before, there's no reason not to join in now. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, and they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. And over the...
Cool, hey? I'm not going to dance like that, by the way. I know, I'm sorry. I do have... I've been called a lone nut before, but, you know, interpretive dance while on stage, you're going to be first follower? Talking about dancing and modeling, anyone want to do like flossing, like kids do with Fortnite emotes? No? All right, good. So this idea of leadership influencing others just by being an example is key part of modeling, right? That's modeling behavior, modeling an approach. Grace Hopper, you might have heard of, anyone? Okay, some of you need to know your compute history a little bit more. One of the leaders of the industry basically said, you know, you manage things, but you lead people. This idea that, again, we lead people, we influence people one-on-one. It's not about having a management position title or anything else, it's about leadership. So again, we want to model a behavior. And you might at this point go, well, hey, Richard, you know what? I'm actually fine. I'm good. It's not me, I'm not the problem. It's the rest of the team that sucks, right? That might be you saying that. And I would turn around and go, really? Are you sure? Are you yourself not improving? Are you sitting on what we might call the okay plateau, where I've got to that point and I'm okay, Jack? And you're not being an example of continuous improvement to others? Or are you like that dancing guy? Are you the lone nut in your team who seems to be improving and just waiting for someone to follow? Maybe. Consideration time. So let's talk about personal reignition, because if you can show how you reignite your own desire to improve, then you can be that example to the rest of your team. You can be the spark within your team that gets them going again. Because any change starts with you. Now, with that, the idea might be, well, we need to be passionate about something. If I'm passionate about it, I'm going to be into it, I'm going to improve, it's going to be awesome, I need passion, passion. And you read things online, and you'll see a lot of this. Yeah, passion's rubbish. Passion's great, like an intervention to get you started, but passion should not be the goal in the long term. Instead, what psychologists have found is that passions change far more often than we think. What did you guys want to be when you were kids? Astronauts? Yeah, firemen, policemen, whatever else. My nephew wanted to be a clock at one point. I don't know, that's weird. Our passions change all the time. You might have followed a sport for years, you're into it, and then over time you've drifted away from that sport and you picked up something else. It happens, no big deal. What psychologists have found, though, is that passion actually can be a useful starting point, but it's fueled by success. If you're not successful in something or you don't get a return from it, your passions will fade. Again, picking on Dilbert, Scott Adams, the creator, said this. Reality is he's excited by everything on day one. Everything, oh, so exciting. But by day, say 10, if things aren't working the way he expected, then, you know, he just goes, all right. and then the passion's gone. There's no correlation between passion and success. There's no longevity in passion. Don't think about your marriage. You develop passion by, instead, this is Benjamin Todd. There's this article on 80,000hours.org where they looked at 60 different studies on what makes the dream job. All the things that tick the boxes for what is a dream job. And what they nutted it down to is this. Develop passion by doing work you find enjoyable and meaningful. Enjoyment and meaning. If you can get that, awesome. And if you really want to tick all the boxes, then make sure that you get good at something that helps other people. Now, for us in development, this is great, because everything we do should be about helping other people. We have users that we're trying to satisfy, right? The idea of software development is we're trying to solve a problem for someone else. We have an opportunity every single day to help someone. We have skills that we can get good at, and hopefully skills we enjoy, so we should be able to tick all the boxes. I actually think this is wonderful because it means I can get paid for doing my hobby, which is great. Dale Carnegie says this. Carnegie, if you're not aware of it, is how to win friends and influence people kind of guy. People rarely succeed unless they have fun in what they're doing. Straightforward. So what if you've lost the fun? What if you're a sad cat? Again, think about your time. You won't be able to make any changes if you're 100% busy. But with the spare time that you are going to free up, use that time to get curious, to find something that interests you, find something you can get good at. Take time, spread your eyes, lift your eyes up from the day-to-day that you're doing and start looking around and get curious. Think about the problems you might be interested in. What are the things you would love to satisfy? The little things in the back of your head that you've gone, I've never really tried to scratch that itch. These are things that you can do and start looking at. The fact that you're here, hopefully you've been to a whole bunch of sessions that are a little bit outside the norm, and you haven't just gone to the same sessions covering things you already know, but have gone to things where I've never even heard of that. I'm just going to turn up and go to that Go talk, which is actually happening concurrently. Or the Vue.js talk, because maybe you're an Angular person and you go, I might want to learn a different framework just for something different. It's not wildly out of my range, but it's a little bit different. Or I go to a UX talk or something like that. Think about those things, because at the end of the day, you're never going to find anything new by doing what you've always done. No surprises there. Now, I will say there's one other thing to keep aware of on this, is this issue of burnout. It's really easy to get excited again by everything. There's so much stuff that's outside what you do day to day. You could just go off and try and do it all. It's going to be wonderful. You've got this wonderful plan. Do it, everything. Woo! It'd be so awesome. And then you look around at what some of the other people are doing, and you go, oh, wow, look at how much they do. That's so cool. I'm going to be like that. And you try and copy what they do. And you try and work out how to emulate what they do. And you try and get your GitHub profile to be green all the time, solid green. Every day, got more than one contribution. It's going to be brilliant. People are going to hire me because I've got a big green GitHub. And then you burn out, and then you lose your energy, you lose your passion, and you're actually worse than when you started. We don't want that. I don't want to see husks of developers who are so worried about trying to keep up a social profile, they forget the enjoyment factor. Enjoyment is the key. So keep a balance in all you do. Always make sure that you focus on what you're doing. It's really easy to get distracted by all the other things that are out there. So easy to get distracted. So easy to get, what are you looking at? Ah, see how easy? Little things pop up and they take our attention away. They steal our attention. If you want to get good at something, you need to put some dedication into it. You need to have some focus on that thing. You can't improve everything at once. And yes, turn off your notifications in your phone and your desktop. Just now, this might feel a bit like a New Year's resolution. OK, fair enough. So let's take a tangent. Let's talk about New Year's resolutions. Why don't they succeed? Very simply, we give ourselves get-out clauses. So who did the New Year's resolution thing this year? I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to exercise more. I'm going to grow more hair. Yeah. It doesn't happen often because we think in our heads, this is really hard. If I've got to get up every day at 5 in the morning and go for a jog, it's great in summer, but bloody winter comes along. Do you know how cold it is in the morning? And we give ourselves these get-out clauses. And I'll just lie in this once, and then I'll lie in again tomorrow, and then I'll lie, and then I'm back to my same old habits because we think it's hard. There's been studies on this. 2016, a recent one. Woolley and Fishback talked to some people before their New Year's resolution, said, what do you think it is that's going to make your New Year's resolution successful this time? Well, it basically comes down to whether it's important and if it's fun, especially if it's important. If it's important that I have, I do more exercise, so I've got more energy to spend with the kids and whatever else, important, right? What they found in the study was the importance factor had nothing to do with it. It's just if it's fun. Humans like fun. I don't know, it's weird. So for us, that means, very simply, if you get reward from your changes, if you get benefit from it, you'll stick to it. Not hard, right? So again, find things you enjoy. Find things that are fun to do. Improve what you enjoy, and if you don't enjoy it, automate it. Or give it to someone else. Delegation, or just don't do it at all and wait for someone to complain. But improve the things you enjoy, right? Again, Carnegie says this, everything you've ever done is because you wanted something and decided to do something about it. Straightforward. Remember that job satisfaction thing we mentioned before, 80,000 hours? Again, find something you enjoy, improve it, get better at it, passion will increase. These are good things. This will get you motivated. And if you're motivated, you're now that lone nut who's excited. You find someone else, you talk to them at work, and hey, you're sitting, you're talking around the coffee machine, and this is what I was doing, it's so cool. And they go, really? And they catch the bug. And then maybe they start looking at something. And now you've got two nuts. And then another one gets infected by the excitement bug. And they start learning. And then all of a sudden, we've got a movement and we're changing our team. This is a good thing. Now, in terms of improvement, just switching back to what we were talking about, should we go deep on something or do we go wide? Personally, I'm someone who goes fairly wide on a lot of things and fairly deep on only one or two things. I like to know everything that's out there, but I don't go deep on it until I need it. But maybe you go, well, do we really need to? I mean, these people obviously didn't need to worry about improving anything. Anyone had one of those jobs in the past? Especially the dot matrix printer repairer? I used to do VAX VMS. I was never a Silverlight guru, thank goodness, or a Flash designer. I have done sort of COBOL programming. I did a thing called English Application Language, which was a dialect of COBOL. I did RPG2 at one point, just to prove I'm really old. What would happen in your team if they started improving deeply in their current skill sets? What would that change? How much more productive would they be? How much more enjoyment would they have? Now, if you're doing BAU kind of work, you might go, well, I don't need to improve anything because I'm just doing bug fixes and small change. Yeah, but what if you could get through all that really quickly and then find time to now start exploring different ideas and improving what you're working on instead of complaining that you're working on nothing new? Would be nice. What if every quarter, let's say, your team learned a new skill? What would happen? What would that change in terms of the work that you're producing and the value you add and the way you help others? So Scott Adams again, in terms of improvements and whether to go deep or wide, said this. One strategy for getting ahead is being really good at a particular skill, but to stand out, you need to be world-class in that. And there are people like that. No problem at all. And if that's you, go for it. For him, he went a bit wider. He managed to combine different kind of average skills to make something fairly unique. Because let's face it, Dilbert is not the best drawn cartoon in the world. In terms of ourselves, how do we acquire skills? We go through these three stages. Cognitive being where we're starting to learn stuff, where our head melts and we're going, I don't get it. And then eventually we get to a point where we go, okay, now I kind of get it, and it's starting to associate. And eventually we get to this point where the skill we've learned is autonomous. We don't have to think about it anymore. It's mental muscle memory, which is great. Goleman, who wrote the emotional intelligence book, started the EQ movement, basically says this: amateurs are content to let their efforts become bottom up. They're content to get autonomous. They get to good enough and then they stop improving. I'm good enough, that's fine. I don't need to do any more. Experts, on the other hand, keep paying attention top down to what they're doing and try to counteract the way the brain wants to automate how things work. We need to keep challenging ourselves. We need to keep thinking about things differently. Anders Ericsson, who's another psychologist, says this: to improve ourselves, we need to watch ourselves fail and learn from our mistakes. Not a big deal. And what separates the experts from the rest of us is that they tend to engage in really directed, highly focused routine. Now, this is this idea of deliberate practice. Anyone heard of this? This is where code carders and stuff come in. And most people will go, deliberate practice just means practice on purpose. But that's not what deliberate practice is. Deliberate practice is trying to change your brain so you don't keep forcing yourself into a rut of thinking. Come at problems from different angles and different perspectives to keep yourself fresh, to constantly be thinking, what's another way to do it? So if you're a procedural programmer, learn OO. If you're an OO programmer, learn functional. If you're a functional programmer, learn procedural. Sounds weird, but it challenges your thinking. It breaks you out of the rut that you're in. Daniel Dennett, who wrote a book called Intuition Pump, says this: mistakes are just opportunities for learning. In fact, they're the only opportunity to learn. You don't learn through success. Success reinforces a mindset. Failure makes sure you challenge it. He then goes on to say this: sometimes you don't just want to risk making mistakes, you actually genuinely want to make them, because that forces you to go through that learning process. Sound good? That doesn't mean go to work and just create bugs, by the way, just so you know. Now, with expertise and mistake making, you want to have someone to give you feedback. And ideally that feedback, again, Goleman saying this, should come from someone else, someone with an expert eye who's got some experience, who's got the ability to point at the problem and help you identify it and help you improve. Because it's the feedback that matters just as much as the mistake making and the effort you put into it. If you make mistakes and don't get feedback, you don't improve. Straightforward? So, if you're on the OK plateau, that's fine. This idea that I've stopped improving. But if that's the case, don't be upset when the rest of your team does exactly the same thing. You've just modeled the behavior yourself. So, how can we mess with our heads? How can we try and do things intervention-wise to change how things work? So let's try and make this a bit more practical. So, let's make some bad fixes. Oh, sorry, let's not make some bad fixes. What if we keep making bad fixes? I can even read my own slides. See? Thank you for the feedback and telling me I got it wrong. Anyone tried the 5 whys method of debugging? Most of us just jump into the code, find where the bug is, change it, carry on. 5 whys would be the idea that we've got this problem. Why is this a problem? Oh, it's because of that code there. Why did we let that code into our system? Teenager approach, right? Anyone got teenagers? You know what you probably understood what I was saying just then, right? Like, we've made that mistake as a team. Why did we make that mistake? What did we need? Because we didn't do unit testing. Oh, why didn't we do unit testing? Because we were in a, well, why were we in a rush? Because we had an unrealistic deadline and no one pushed back on whatever else. And why did we do that? And why, and why, and why, until we get to the root cause of the problem. We keep fixing symptoms, we don't fix the root cause. It's a hard process to do because you have to think more than just the surface level. You have to go beyond that. I do, by the way, in terms of these bad fixes, I do like seeing, anyone follow, I know it's in the room, but anyone follow the now Azure DevOps blogs at all? Where they do incident reviews. They post details around why things have gone wrong and what the problems are that led to that. Really awesome reads. Well worth doing those sort of things yourself. If you have a big production outage in your team, go through this sort of thing to understand how you got to that place in the first place and what changes you need to make to stop it happening in the future. Are there process changes? Are there checks and balances that aren't in place that you could put in place to fix things and improve them in the future. What about other quality problems? Now, I know when I think quality problems, I think Battlefield Earth. Has anyone tried watching this movie? How far did you make it? All the way through. Yeah, I got about 15 minutes. I went, this is crap. Yeah, maybe do random things like try writing automated tests before making a code change. Or for some of you, just try writing tests. Or put your WCAG checks and SonarQube things in your build pipelines and whatever else. You know, try automating the things that you would do manually but you find boring. Or do random other things like conduct a bug bash. Challenge that mental model of yours. If you really know how things work and you're doing things the right way as a team, then your bug bash should return how many problems? I did this with a team at the start of the year who thought their software was great. Wasn't the most usable software in the world, by the way, but they thought it was great. We did a bug bash in one day on one specific area of the system, and we found 200 bugs in one day. They were gobsmacked. They didn't realize they were that far off because they'd let their mental model of how things work blind them to the facts that were telling them otherwise. Run a usability test. Put people that don't normally use your software in front of your system and just tell them to do a task. Watch them do it. It'll be hilarious. This same team, we asked them to find the phone number of a contact. 5 different people tried it. 2 people gave up. Find a phone number. It's not that hard. Apparently it was. These, again, will challenge your mental model of how things work and make you reassess if you're doing things the right way, and then you can kick back into the 5 whys approach and see what's going on. Or maybe you do know it all. Awesome. You're someone who's gone deep on something. If that's you, jump onto Stack Overflow, find a whole bunch of questions around your area of expertise that have no answers, and be the answerer. I guarantee you don't know it all. It's a good way to test yourself. And what you find if you try answering those things, that you will continue to deepen your knowledge, because now you have to learn things that you hadn't considered before because we have a perspective of how things should be done. Maybe you rely on tooling too much. Challenge yourself again. Try fixing a bug or changing a feature without using your IDE of choice. That doesn't mean if you're a Visual Studio user, try doing it using Eclipse. Maybe don't use the debugger at all. Whoa, what, I can't press F5? Really? Do it without logging any output. It'll mess with your head. You'll have to really think about, how do I solve this problem without doing any of this stuff? But you can't do this if you're so busy that you can't take the time needed to actually stretch the muscles in your head and start taking things from a different perspective. Or disconnect the mouse. Simple stuff. Who knows their keyboard shortcuts? Who's someone who debugs by going click, 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 click? Drives me nuts. If I sit next to someone I'm pairing with them, I actually slap them on the hand. No. Hit your keyboard shortcuts. It keeps you in the zone. It helps you work quicker. It's always a good thing to do. Pick up new concepts. You're at a conference, go look at talks on other languages. Whether it's Go, whether it's Elixir, whether it's, what's that other one? Oh, some of you know, that's good. Dart. If you didn't know, then go learn some logos. Oh, well. And do a code kata in a language you don't know. You will find that there are concepts in how that language works that are different than what you're used to that will challenge your thinking. And again, you'll go through that initial skill learning stage where your head's just going, I can't cope. And then it will kick in and you'll get it, and then you'll be able to apply those same skills to different problems in the future. Improve your teamwork. Woody Zull, this guy here, is the guy who came up with mob programming. Again, did this by simply experimenting with his team. He said, well, if pair programming is good, and if you haven't tried pair programming, just do that. If pair programming is good, what would happen if we did the whole team together at once? And he found that that was even more productive. Counterintuitive, but it wouldn't happen if they didn't try the experiment and they didn't challenge their thinking of how things should be done. Again, keep that mental model pressured so that you can see if things are right. What about deliberate practice? Focusing on speed. So you've got good skills in something, you want to go deep, challenge yourself, record a session of you solving a code kata, and then try and beat the time. Spot where you're spending time you shouldn't be, and then try and do it faster again in the future, and then faster again in the future. And see how quick you can actually go. See how well you can learn your tools, how well you can know your way around what you're doing. It's a challenge. It's a form of deliberate practice. It's not, can I solve the kata? It's, can I do it in a different way? Anyone have this problem where you get stuck in a search loop? You know what I mean by a search loop? I'm looking for something on the internet, and I get distracted by a search result that I shouldn't have got distracted by. And then I follow that, and then I follow that, and then I follow that, and then I follow that. And all of a sudden, I've got 48 tabs open in my browser, and I've run out of memory on my machine. Try doing it without ever using the browser and without going to Google, Stack Overflow, or a doc site to try and figure out how to solve your next challenge. Whoa. Maybe you struggle to focus. Pomodoro technique. Again, if you haven't come across this sort of thing, do it. Or maybe turn off social media. Use apps to turn things off. Put your phone on flight mode so you don't get interrupted, so that you can focus on things. Turn off those desktop notifications. Improve your communication. You're not good at communicating ideas. There's a challenge for you. Continuous improvement means learn how to communicate better. So in a trusted audience, hopefully those people you work with, say, I just want to talk through this thing, and do it. So organize a lunch and learn on a topic you don't know. This will force you to learn, by the way. I do this all the time. I do a talk without having any idea of what I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to talk about that subject there, and then I go into panic mode while I try and learn it, because I don't want to embarrass myself in public too much. That's why I'm not doing the dancing. Organize that lunch and learn. Give yourself a bit of time, learn it, deliver it, and then importantly, get the feedback. Did that make sense? What could I do better? Did I stumble over my words too much? Did the ideas flow properly? And then learn and improve, and then do it again on a different topic in the future. Share your knowledge. Sharing your knowledge is a great way to influence others and to help the team improve. Remember those, I learned this type of email. Share your code review notes with others, write blog posts, whatever else. Sharing knowledge is a great way to influence and lead, so do that. And if all of that's too easy, then really mess with your future self. I've never tried this one, so I don't know if it would work, but hey, crazy ideas are fun, right? So write code using variable method names like temp method 1234 and temp var 1234. Submit a pull request with the code in that state. Now, if the pull request gets accepted, you've got a problem. But then when that finally gets rejected, you will have context switched. You'll be on something else. So when that 3 days passes and someone looks at your pull request at work, then you get that code back and you have to try and refactor it to figure out what you were doing in the first place. Is that going to force you to think differently? I hope so. But these are random, stupid ideas. This is this case of deliberate mistakes to learn from them. You can probably come up with others. This is not an exhaustive list. The idea is to try different things and to do stuff that not only gets you thinking about things differently and you excited and you learning, but then lets you be that influence within the teams around you. So let's recap. How do we get a team improving again that's hit that plateau? We start with interventions. Different intervention types. Understand how they're thinking, fixed mindsets, what their capacity is, and so forth, and make changes in the system that will allow behaviors to change. Then model that behavior yourself. Be an example for the others. Influence and lead. You do not need a management or a leadership title to lead other people. Be that example. Do it yourself. And I've given you a whole bunch of ideas to try. You can come up with your own. And yes, it will be uncomfortable doing this. It does take time. You will make mistakes. That's the whole point of learning and improving. But always be discovering things and always be growing. Keep that growth mindset. Find the fun in what you do, and importantly, remembering job satisfaction. Make sure it's something that helps other people. And if you do that, hopefully things will work out well, because hope's a strategy. All right, thank you everyone. That's me. You can find me again online, rbanks54. Don't ask me what the 54 stands for. It's just a random number. And there's my email address. I'm gonna hang out the back in the hallway track after this if you wanna ask questions. And apart from that, we're done. Thank you.